Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2022 Senate election in Pennsylvania, and why I think the Republicans are still favored despite everything. So, let's just get right into it here. There's been a lot of momentum for the Democrats and John Fetterman because the consensus right now is that Fetterman is running a better campaign, and that Dr. Oz is kind of imploding and just does not have what it takes to win a U.S. Senate seat like this. And so, I think that these things are partially true. John Fetterman, to his credit, John Fetterman has exceeded my expectations personally. I kind of thought that his campaign would be very mediocre and that he would, kind of trail and have an uninspiring finish in November. But right now, he does have the momentum. Whether you think he's going to win or not, he has kind of this energy and momentum that Dr. Oz really does not have. And ultimately, I think that a lot of that boils down to the fact that he is running a very online campaign. And whether you like, whether you think it's a good thing or not, it has its disadvantages that I think have shown in the past. Online campaigns are really cool if you're on Twitter 24/7, or if you are interested in seeing Dr. Oz's tweets getting ratioed all the time, which is objectively funny, sure, but getting ratioed on Twitter doesn't actually translate to losing a general election in Pennsylvania. Because ultimately, most Pennsylvania swing voters aren't spending their time posting memes on Twitter. They're doing other things because they have better things to be doing. So ultimately, while I think you can make a case for, Dr. Oz always getting ratioed on Twitter shows he doesn't have the energy, or that his campaign is being poorly run. That's a case you can make, but I don't really. So he doesn't. To me, it's kind of a non-starter. It's not really an issue to me for Dr. Oz, and I don't really view Twitter as a valuable campaign mechanism except for fundraising, which, Dr. Oz hasn't done great in either, but also I think the Republican Senate committees need to do everything they can to hold this seat, um, especially if they ultimately pull out of one of the three super competitive Democratic-held seats in Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. If that does happen, they might just have to go save Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. And so my thing for these reasons is really hard for me to just see like a Fetterman surge and just a total and complete, annihilation of Dr. Oz. And so ultimately, I don't really think that you can tell me that Fetterman would win. Fetterman might win an election held today, maybe by half a point at best. But the bottom line here isn't Twitter and how John Fetterman has a few good campaign ads. The bottom line is that we're basically in a recession. Joe Biden's approval rating is 38%. The Democratic Party is more unpopular than they've been in 20 years. And Pennsylvania is a decently right-trending state. And so those three things are very hard for someone like John Fetterman to overcome. And I also think that John Fetterman's not that good of a candidate for a few reasons I'll get into later in this video. But the Democrats would need a set of really good circumstances for him to win Pennsylvania, which I think they have in the governor's race, because I think Shapiro's the best, not aside from Bob Casey, he's their best statewide Democrat in terms of electability that could have run for governor or senate or whatnot. And he is running against Doug Mastriano, who I think is a very poor opponent. And so I think Shapiro's going to win that race. But I think Democrats are going to lose the House popular vote in Pennsylvania. I think they're going to lose this Senate race, and I think that they're ultimately going to fail to retake any of these chambers of the House or the Pennsylvania Senate. And that's just where I stand on Pennsylvania. So we're just going to get right into it here, taking a look at the 2020 map in Pennsylvania, which obviously Joe Biden won. So in Pennsylvania, I'm going to go to the full results here so we can zoom into Pennsylvania. So what we saw here was a very strong showing for Joe Biden in suburbs. He won Chester County by 17%. And if you look at 2016, Clinton only won Chester County by about 10%. So Chester County shifted 7% to the left. He won Montgomery County by 26%, which is a great showing. He won Bucks County by 4.4%, which coincidentally mirrors the exact popular vote. So Bucks County essentially mirrored the country, and the rest of these suburban counties, Delaware as well, were fairly solid for Joe Biden. He won them all by more than 15%. He also won Lackawanna, which is home to Scranton, although it wasn't that great of a margin. He only won it by 8%. And if you look at other elections in Pennsylvania, the 2018 Senate race, which again was a very strong performance for the Democrats, but Bob Casey won Lackawanna County by 23%, and it only voted for Joe Biden by about 8%. So he didn't do too well in Lackawanna, but he was able to win it. He also won Monroe by about 6 points. He narrowly carried Northampton, which is a flip for 2016, and he held on to Lehigh by about the same margin as he held on to Lackawanna. He lost Luzerne, and again, these are all kind of like these counties up here, Lackawanna, Monroe, Northampton, Luzerne. These are all white working class counties. And he lost Luzerne by about 14 points, and he was, I think, the worst performing Democrat in Luzerne on the ballot. He did not really do very well in Luzerne. Josh Shapiro, who ran for Attorney General the same year in 2020, actually carried Luzerne narrowly. So Democrats are able to do fairly well in Luzerne, but Biden did not. Biden also won Dauphin, which was the home of Harrisburg, by about 8%, and he won Centre County, but he underperformed here. This is a college county. The Democratic votes mostly come from state colleges where Penn State is, and Biden probably would have won it by more for the COVID lockdowns where a lot of students weren't actually learning in person. So I think this is one of the rare spots where Fetterman's going to outrun Biden because there'll be more students on campus. He also won Allegheny by about 20 points, which is a solid showing. Generally, the rule of thumb for Democrats in Pennsylvania is that you want to win Allegheny by about 21, 22%, and Biden ran a little bit behind that, but he made up for it in the Philly suburbs, which is really where he did incredibly well. Then he flipped Erie County, and he won it by about 1%. Again, this is a county that's very working class, is a Democratic down ballot, but at the federal level voted for Donald Trump in 2016, almost voted for him again in 2020. But again, if you compare it to like the 2018 Senate race, Erie County was very solid for Bob Casey. He won it by 18%. So, so I don't really see a path for Fetterman when you look at this map. And ultimately, in midterm elections, what matters more for working class counties like Luzerne that are more Republican leaning matter less because the turnout goes down as a percentage of the electorate, whereas the suburban counties like Chester, Montgomery, Bucks, Berks, and Lancaster all matter more because their share of the electorate spikes. And what I mean by that, just those who don't really understand, and again, it's my fault because I'm not the greatest explainer of all time, but essentially, the suburban voters and essentially voters with college degrees are more likely to vote in midterms than non-college educated voters or rural voters because they're more likely to be paying attention to politics and know, oh, there's a midterm today, right? And so that's why midterms have lower turnout because the turnout falls specifically with voters of color and with rural voters. So ultimately, in the past, that's really hurt Democrats because, again, Democrats have have kind of relied on a coalition of working class voters and voters of color, but now their coalition is less rural working classy and more suburban, so that helps them. But the thing with Fetterman is that Fetterman is running a campaign tailor-made for white working class voters. He's trying to kind of turn back the clock in a lot of these areas to maybe 2018 or 2016 or 2012, and again, that's a risk-reward campaign strategy. It's good in some cases, bad in some cases, but I think he's going to underperform a lot of people's expectations in these Philly suburbs. I think Dr. Oz is a better candidate than people give him credit for. Again, his favorables are pretty low right now. He's not doing too well in the polls, but really, it's mostly just because of that contested Republican primary. It's mostly just because he came out of a primary that was very, very heated, and he only beat David McCorn by 800 votes, and a lot of Kathy Barnett voters felt disenfranchised. And I think they're going to come home from eventually because he's been demonizing John Fetterman, and the voters are going to come home from eventually, even if they don't love him. And so, I just I think that Fetterman isn't really a great fit for the suburbs. He's from Braddock, which is a steel time right outside of Pittsburgh, and that to me doesn't really have that doesn't really connect well with the suburbs the way Josh Shapiro, who is the Montgomery County Commissioner, or even a Tom Wolf or a Joe Biden or a Bob Casey are able to do very well in the Philly suburbs. I think Fetterman runs behind all of those people in these suburbs. I think he wins Chester by less than 15. He wins Montgomery by less than 25, and he probably loses Bucks by about a point, although Bucks is a pure toss-up. Now, I just want to get the polls out of the way because I'm kind of debunking the Fetterman arguments because the consensus is that Fetterman's the favorite right now because there are a lot of online people who think Fetterman's running a good campaign, which he's running a fine campaign. He's not running an amazing campaign the way Tim Ryan or Raphael Warnock would be. So Fetterman is been up in every poll, and the three most recent polls have Fetterman up by 9, by 6, by 4, and by 9. And this is, by the way, this Signal poll is probably the most concerning for Dr. Oz, even though he has the smallest deficit in it. The Signal is a Republican poll. I know it doesn't say it here, but this is actually a Republican poll. He's down by 4 in it. And then in the Blueprint poll, which again is it doesn't say it, but like to be fair, Blueprint poll is a pretty Democratic leaning pollster. They had Fetterman up by 9, so I don't really buy that. And then Suffolk, USA Today did this Fetterman plus 9 poll that I don't really believe, because they had Fetterman winning the white vote by 1%, despite the fact that Joe Biden lost the white vote by double digits in Pennsylvania. So not great. Like, unless white voters are suddenly coming back to the Democratic Party, which they probably aren't, this poll is garbage. And then this Fabrizio Lee poll is like the only one that's like actually like I'm like, oh, okay, fine. So Fetterman, I think, might have the lead right now, but I don't think that's going to maintain until election day. I think the economy is going to stay the same. I think Joe Biden's might even fall even more in approval, and I think ultimately the Roe anger is going to stay, but it might subside a little bit. And Democrats right now are barely hanging on to this momentum right now. So yeah, I think I'll do a county map Pennsylvania for those of you who are curious to see what I think. So first, I'm just going to fill out every county to be Republican, because ultimately, um, it's like, most counties are Republican even if they aren't have too many people. So I'm just going to fill this out. We can work from here. So obviously there are a few state Democratic counties. Fetterman's going to win Allegheny by more than 15. He'll probably win, or he'll definitely win Philadelphia. He'll win Delaware. I think he wins Montgomery by more than 15 as well. There's like an off chance he wins it by less, but I think he'll be fine there. And then, yeah, so next up for Fetterman, I think he wins Chester by like 10 or 11, kind of like a 2016 margin, maybe by a little more. It really depends on how unpopular Dr. Oz ultimately becomes and, stays. Like if he stays this unpopular, Fetterman probably wins Chester by around a Biden margin, but I'm counting on that not happening. So yeah, then if you look at the 2020 results here with Joe Biden, Biden narrowly won Northampton County. And actually, I want to look at the shift here so we can get an idea of how these areas are trending relative to 2016. So, most counties in Pennsylvania trended left, but specifically, like if you look at Northampton, it trended 4.5% to the left. Lehigh trended 3% to the left, and then Lackawanna turned 5% to the left. So I think that Fetterman's going to do fairly well in Lackawanna. I do think that he's going to win it by probably 10%, maybe a little more than Joe Biden. But again, it really comes down to how well he gets turnout from the city of Scranton, and if he can actually turn black. Because like the big question is, can he actually get working class voters back on his side? And I don't know, and I'm counting on that kind of not happening. But yes, Biden did really poorly in Lackawanna, anyways. Monroe is a toss up for me. I'll like it was Biden plus 6, and it's not super elastic, so I'll give it to Fetterman. But I would not be shocked if Dr. Oz pulls it off. Wait, no, I think that's okay. So that's Monroe. Then Northampton, I think, is a flip. It trended left, but it trended left a bit, but I don't know. It's only Biden plus 1. It's Fetterman could still win it, but I don't think he will. And then Lehigh County was a Biden plus 8 county. I think Fetterman wins it by barely over 5%. And then I also think he wins Center, which is the home of the University of Pennsylvania, by a little more than Joe Biden, which is helpful for him. And then I think he narrowly loses Bucks County. I think he loses. I don't know, actually, because the thing is, Luzerne is fairly right trending overall. I know it trended left between 2016 and 2020, but ultimately it's a more right trending county because Obama won it in 2012, and obviously that isn't happening again. And Biden lost it by 14%, so I'll say that Fetterman loses it by a little more, but again, it's kind of like, I don't know. I'll put it likely out of an abundance of caution, but I wouldn't be stunned if it's more than 15%. And then, Dauphin, I forgot about Dauphin. I think Fetterman's going to hold on to Dauphin, but Biden actually did quite well in Dauphin, so I think Fetterman's only going to win it by about 4 or 5%. I think he'll run behind Biden in Dauphin by a fair bit. And then Lancaster and Berks both voted for Trump, 15 and 8%. I think I could see them trending left a little bit. I think they'll both be likely Republican, with Berks being about Oz winning it by 7 or 8, and Lancaster was winning it by 13 or 14. And yeah, that's kind of like the Pennsylvania Dutch country. I don't really see Fetterman doing too well there ultimately with these voters, and I don't think he'll be able to turn back the clock in Exurban and Pittsburgh. These are working class voters that haven't really voted Democratic in since 2008, maybe even the early 2000s with Al Gore. And I don't really think Fetterman's the guy to get those back, when even Bob Casey couldn't win Westmoreland, and Casey was a fantastic candidate for working class voters in Pennsylvania. So I'm inclined to say that Fetterman loses these regions by probably a Biden-esque margin, which isn't great for him, although Beaver County won't narrow up either. Cumberland, I think Cumberland's going to trend right. I don't think it'll be worth too much to talk about. And then same with Pike. Pike will probably be R plus 20. Now, Erie to me is like the county I'm most perplexed by because I don't really know who's going to win it. So I'm going to give it to Dr. Oz out of a gut feeling that he's going to win the Senate race because Erie usually votes the winner. But yeah, like it's really close. You can make both arguments. So I think on one hand, you could say that Erie County is trending towards the right, and ultimately, no matter what, since it's a more Republican leading year, Dr. Oz is going to win it. But on the other hand, you could also say that John Fetterman is running a good campaign for working class voters, and Shapiro is probably going to win it, and that is enough to give John Fetterman this victory here. And so I think this is the purest toss-up county. This and Bucks County are really close to me. But yeah, I'm gonna say that that Fetterman narrowly loses it as of right now and loses the Senate race by about 3, maybe 4%. I know that's I know that's very optimistic for Dr. Oz, but I really just don't think Fetterman has it to win this race. Again, that could change between now and November. I could finally get my mind convinced, and I could maybe see Fetterman start to play his cards a little better in my eyes. But yeah, that's just where I stand right now. But again, if I'm wrong and I still think this and Dr. Oz ends up losing, then I will end up with egg on my face and I'll have to talk about it. So, it's a risk reward. But thanks so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.